What is Spider-Man Brand New Day? Well, if you're a newer or more casual fan, you'll know that this is the title of the fourth up-and-coming Spider-Man movie from the MCU. However, the title Brand New Day should sound familiar to Spidey fans who have read the comics, as this was a specific era for the webhead. After the infamous end of J. Michael Straczynski's run, where editorial would force the separation of Peter Parker and Mary Jane, fans would be treated to a new era for Spidey, an era that was meant to feel fresh for new readers, but exciting enough for old readers. How they planned to do this was by releasing Spider-Man 3 times in 1 month, making this a nearly weekly title. And if that sounds like a lot of work for one creative team, it's because it is. And speaking of creative team, who was going to work on the next Spider-Man run after the beloved JMS run? Well, with Marvel basically wanting Spider-Man to be a weekly title, they couldn't just assign one writer, so they came up with the Brain Trust, a group of writers that would bounce back and forth with the main Amazing Spider-Man title. This would include names like Dan Slott, Mark Guggenheim, Zeb Wells, and Bob Dale. Along the way, Mark Waid would chip in on some issues, and that's how we would get over 100 issues of the Brand New Day era in only about 3 years. Fans are very back and forth with this Brand New Day era. A lot of OG fans were definitely still impacted by the separation of Peter and MJ, but when you look at the run, the highs are definitely the highs. Everything else is just kind of meh. But today we're talking about undoubtedly the best thing to happen from this era, and that is 100% the artist. Similar to there being multiple authors for the title, Marvel would also have an array of talented artists for the ASM title, giving us what is probably the most artistically ambitious era for the webhead. Now, I'm going to be mainly focusing on 5 artists, the 5 artists you probably saw on the thumbnail, and it's the 5 artists that I think left the biggest impact on the title, and ultimately, it's just my favorite 5 artists from this era. We're also mainly talking about the beginning of this Brand New Day era, so kind of the first year, kind of the first like 30, 40 issues. But of course, let's start off in the beginning with the first artist. If you were reading Marvel Comics in the 2000s or have read that era of Marvel Comics, chances are you know who Steve McNiven is. Most known for his work on Civil War and Old Man Logan, McNiven blends a bit of realism in his art, making his pages super detailed and giving them an aesthetic that can be best described as clean. His Spider-Man would debut the Brand New Day era, with his cover of Amazing Spider-Man 546 being super recognizable to fans. Now, McNiven would only work on Spider-Man for the first 3 issues, but the work he does in this opening arc is breathtaking. Although we didn't get much Spidey in this first issue, his panel flow is great. Creative character placement in panels to keep readers engaged, as well as fantastic expression work, which in general is just a staple for McNiven. We do get beautiful storytelling splash pages like this, and it shows just how great of a visual storyteller McNiven is, even if it isn't Spider-Man swinging around in costume. But of course, when McNiven finally does draw Spider-Man swinging in costume, it's awesome. I love the small details, like the reflection on the lenses at times, and his general movement for the webhead is great. McNiven is also the first artist to show the design of the then new Mr. Negative. Credit to Dexter Vines for the super solid ink work, and the ever so great Dave Stewart for the perfect blend of colors that really round out McNiven's awesome work. Although McNiven's time on the title was short-lived, it's definitely impactful and memorable, and what a start to the era artistically. It's definitely one of my faves, and I just love McNiven all around. Thankfully, the next artist would work on the character a little bit more because they also have some really awesome stuff, and of course, we're talking about Jimenez is mainly known for his highly acclaimed time on Wonder Woman, as not just the artist, but also the writer. However, Jimenez does have notable works throughout his career in Marvel as well. He would make his debut on the webhead and this era in issue 552, and Jimenez out the gate shows he fits right in with the detailed line work and his incredible ability to draw crowds and landscapes. His panel layouts are some of the best for the webhead, with a nice mixture of traditional grids to long panels, overlapping panels, and even stylized panels that help the story visually. Jimenez also sort of has a realistic mix to his look, especially in his expressions and body language. And as for his Spider-Man, it's definitely a distinct look with the long head and muscular build. The way he moves the webhead is also fluid and straight up beautiful. Jimenez does action really well with the webhead, and there's a bit of brutality to his pages. Personally, I love his web swinging scenes, as Jimenez blends a natural yet unnatural look to them. Think of how Todd McFarlane would move Spider-Man, just less cartoony in design and a tad bit more realistic in anatomy. describing. Andy Langing is the main inker with Jimenez, and I think his work further highlights the great shadow work overall, and colors by Jeremy Cox blend really well with the aesthetic by Jimenez. Now, the last two artists are very unique in their own sense, but the vibe is still very much matching between the two. But this wouldn't be an artistic renaissance for the webhead if there wasn't a bit of change up and shifting. And this next artist would definitely shake things up to what I would say 110%. And so of course we're talking about Bachalo is most known for his different times on X-Men, and just in general is a well-known Marvel artist. Working on various characters and titles, it's of course no surprise that we would see him work on the webhead. Bachalo starts his time on the Brand New Day era with issue 555. Bachalo's approach to the webhead is far more animated and cartoony, which if you know me, I love for the character. It's his intricate work that truly defines his style, and with the exaggerated proportions along with dynamic panel work, he really gives us a unique feel for the Amazing Spider-Man title. He also has gorgeous environmental work, choosing to add crazy weather like snow to the New York backdrop. It completely amplifies the storytelling panel to panel. As mentioned, his Spider-Man very much feels his own, as the cartoony look is rounded and expressive, very comedic at times, and really encompasses that charm that we love so much from the character. The more animated style also allows for changing in display, either in the face or the body, in certain angles that further adds momentum to the action, or just in general helps the pace of the book. Tim Townsend would be the talented inker to further push the experimental pages, and for coloring, besides some help from Antonio Fabela, the subtle and bold colors were also done by Bachalo himself. It's all around fantastic action that can be messy yet defined, cozy yet hectic, and overall some of the most unique Spider-Man artwork we've ever seen. So 3 artists in, we already see how unique this era feels. Sure, there's great eras for Spider-Man like the 90s, where there was a revolution with Todd McFarlane as he would shake things up, giving influence to other great artists like Mark Bagley and Eric Larson. But this era of Spider-Man specifically felt so special because it wasn't happening year to year or run to run. It was literally arc to arc, week to week. A lot of fans could argue that they want a consistent look when it comes to a comic, and I'm never gonna argue that, but when you look at this just artistically, this era is definitely doing some crazy stuff. So with Bachalo really shaking things up, what's the next artist that could really make a nice shift? Well, that's of course bringing in Martín is most known for his works like Batgirl Year One, and just in general, his Marvel artwork like Daredevil and Doctor Strange. Spider-Man is definitely one of his notable works, and that should come to no surprise because it's absolutely beautiful. Martín would start on issue 559, and he immediately came through with some impressively striking pages. He's a cartoonist through and through, and his style gives Spider-Man a classic feel while also feeling contemporary. His panels are big, and he uses techniques like widescreen pages that makes his action flow and establishes his settings/backgrounds. There's overall an energy to Martín's work on the character that feels so familiar while also being so unique. Martín has influences of European artists like Herrich and his work on Tintin, as well as American Silver Age artists like Steve Ditko, to what can be described as an ultra-modern nostalgia approach to the character. It's what makes his Spider-Man feel sort of timeless. I personally feel like Martín is a perfect fit for the character of Spider-Man, with his eye on different angles and close-ups. It seems like there's a lot of care and passion that goes into his work for the webhead, and there's nothing more that I would want to see from an artist. Martín would ink his own work on the webhead, showing how much of a Renaissance man he is, but extra lucky for fans has to be the collaboration on colors with the legendary Javier Rodriguez. The shadow and light work is perfect with the colors, and the Spidey suit specifically feels classic with the blues and reds by Rodriguez. It is hands down just some of my favorite Spider-Man work of all time. It also helps that Marcos Martín was partnered with Mark Waid, and their Subway storyline is one of my favorite Spider-Man arcs. Now, before we get into the last artist, I want to go over the artist I didn't deep dive as sort of an honorable mention section. Salvador Larroca is actually the artist right after Steve McNiven, and I personally love his big panels and fast pace, and I personally like his approach to the mask as it's not your usual big lenses, which I normally like, but his look is still effective and very cool. Mike McCone has some great panel work that is kind of crazy, but in a good way. And the way he draws the webhead feels in the same vein as the other artists during this era, but also does feel distinct with the way he draws Spider-Man's body type. And the 1 and 2 issues in this first year by Barry Kinston and Paulo Siqueira, although not my favorites, still do the job of matching the vibe of the regular ongoing artists to give fans a familiar feel and look when they were filling in. However, they still have wonderful work with their own panel layouts. Post-edit does here. I completely forgot about Paulo Rivera, one of the best, not just for this Brand New Day era, but just in general for Spider-Man. But he worked more towards the end of the Brand New Day era, and just in general, he's awesome and gonna get his own full video, so don't worry about that. Now, just because these artists aren't in my top 5, or aren't the ones that I'm mainly talking about, doesn't mean that their impact isn't as great for the Brand New Day era. I'm just mainly talking about the artists that I really enjoyed. If you guys disagree with me and you think I'm crazy for not talking more about one of these guys, let me know down below. Of course, this Brand New Day era spans way farther than what I'm also talking about, so artists like Barry Kinston would return and work quite a bit on the Amazing Spider-Man title. But for the last artist, we need to end on a banger. And with the previous artist we talked about in Martín, giving us a familiar look to the Spider-Man character, why not actually get nostalgic and get a Spider-Man veteran in here? John Romita Jr., the ever-loving GOAT, would make his return to the webhead after 4 years, where he had just come off of a critically acclaimed Spidey run with J. Michael Straczynski. I've got a full video on Romita already, so definitely go check that out for more of a deep dive, but his return is in issue 568, and it is definitely one of the highlights of the Brand New Day era for me. The classic and dynamic pages are back, with the fast pace that I absolutely love. This arc specifically involves Norman and his Thunderbolts, and I love seeing Romita draw those rogues, as well as his design for the new character at the time, Anti-Venom. His issues are brutal as ever, and his Spider-Man feels as heroic, with these spread pages that feel poster-worthy. It always feels great to see Romita Jr. on the webhead, and sure, his true peak and prime was back in the early 2000s and even 90s, but John Romita Jr. has a lasting legacy with the character for a reason, and to me, this is still some fantastic work by Romita for the web slinger. He's partnered with absolute legend Klaus Janson on inks, and the flatter approach to the colors come from a Dean White, giving us a different approach from the color work during the J. Michael Straczynski era, which really gives this Brand New Day era a distinct feel for Junior's extensive time on the character. But that is what I believe to be the best part of the Spider-Man Brand New Day era. But what do you guys think of Brand New Day Spider-Man? What do you guys think of the artists that we talked about today? And do you guys want to see any special videos specifically on some of these artists? I can definitely give them, the Can They Spider-Man treatment, and we can talk about their overall Spider-Man, not just from this era. Let me know down below what your favorite Spider-Man era is for artists. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe for more.